The morning my husband left for his conference in Chicago, he kissed me on the forehead, told me to take care of things, and walked out the front door without once looking back at his daughter's bedroom. His daughter, that's what he always called her. His daughter. From his first marriage. Like the 3 years I'd spent washing her hair and helping her practice spelling words and sitting beside her hospital bed at 2 in the morning meant nothing at all. Lily was 9 years old and had been using a wheelchair since a car accident took her mother and damaged her spine 18 months before I came into their lives. That was the official story anyway, the one I believed for almost 2 years. I remember standing at the kitchen window that Tuesday morning, watching his rental car reverse out of the driveway and feeling something I couldn't quite name settle over the house. Not relief, exactly, something heavier. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Is he gone? Lily's voice came from the hallway. I turned around. She was in her chair, wearing the yellow pajamas with the little ducks on them that I'd bought her for her birthday. Her dark hair was tangled from sleep, and she was looking at me with those serious brown eyes that always made her seem older than she was. Yes, baby. Just left. She nodded slowly, like she was processing something. Then she said, "Can I have the waffles today? The ones you make, not the frozen ones." I laughed, because what else do you do? And said yes, of course, the real ones. I had no idea that by the time those waffles were gone, my entire life would look completely different. My husband, Derek, was what people in our suburb of Columbus called a catch. 41, good-looking in a square-jawed, forgettable way. Owned a mid-sized HVAC company that did well enough to put us in a 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood where people had Ring cameras and strong opinions about lawn care. We'd met at a mutual friend's barbecue. He'd been widowed 14 months earlier. He was charming and sad in equal measure, and I was 29 and thought sadness in a man meant depth. Looking back, I can see every single thing I missed. He'd hired me, essentially, though he never would have said it that way. He needed someone to care for Lily full-time, and I was between jobs after leaving a teaching position in Cincinnati. We got married fast. 13 months after that barbecue. Everyone said it was romantic. My mother pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner and said, quietly, "You're sure?" And I told her yes, absolutely, completely sure. I was not sure. But I was lonely, and Lily had already started calling me by my name instead of just her, which felt like progress. The thing about living with a child who uses a wheelchair is that it reorganizes your whole sense of what a house is. Doorways, bathroom tiles, the height of countertops. I'd spent months making modifications, researching equipment, joining online forums for caregivers. Derek wrote the checks when I asked him to, but he was rarely home before 7 and rarely interested in the logistics. He provided. I managed. That was the unspoken contract. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined standing at that kitchen window watching him drive away, was that Lily had been watching him far more carefully than I had. The waffles were almost done when I heard a sound I didn't recognize. A kind of low, mechanical hiss coming from somewhere near the utility room at the back of the house. I turned the burner off and stood still, listening. There it was again. Faint but persistent. I walked toward the hallway. The smell hit me before I reached the utility room door. Faint at first, then unmistakable. That rotten egg chemical smell that gas companies add specifically so you'll know. So you'll get out. My hand went to my phone. I'd left it on the kitchen counter. I turned around to go back for it and nearly walked straight into Lily. Except she wasn't in her wheelchair. She was standing in the hallway. Standing. Both feet flat on the hardwood floor, one hand braced lightly against the wall. Not like someone who couldn't walk, but like someone being careful. Her face was completely calm, which terrified me more than anything else could have in that moment. Lily. My voice came out wrong, too high, half a breath. "I know," she said. I can explain everything. But first we have to turn it off. She walked past me toward the utility room, a slight stiffness on the left side, a careful deliberateness to her steps, but she walked. She opened the utility room door, located the gas shutoff valve on the line behind the water heater, and turned it. Her hands knew exactly where to go. I stood in the hallway and felt the floor tilt under me. When she turned back around, she looked at me with an expression I can only describe as exhausted relief, like someone who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has finally decided to let it out. "I need to tell you some things," she said, "and I need you to not panic until I'm done, okay?" I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway. I didn't plan to. My legs just stopped working. Lily walked back to her wheelchair. She'd left it just around the corner and sat down in it. Old habit, I realized. A habit built over 18 months of careful performance. "Your legs," I finally said. "I had an incomplete injury," she said, using words that sounded borrowed from medical websites, which they probably were. "The doctor said I might regain function. I did. Some. Enough." She paused. "My dad doesn't know." "Why?" "Because I heard him," she said simply. She told me what she'd heard 14 months ago, when she'd woken up in the middle of the night and lay still in her bed. Something she'd learned to do, to stay quiet and listen, the way kids in certain households learn early. Her father had been on the phone in the kitchen, talking to someone she didn't recognize. She crept to her door and listened. He'd been talking about insurance policies. Lily was precise about what she remembered. She was 9, not 6 old enough to understand more than adults expected, especially a child who had already lost one parent and developed a very particular attentiveness to the adults around her. She'd heard her father say my name. She'd heard him talk about the house, about the policy amount, about timing. She'd heard him say, "The kid's in the chair anyway, makes it cleaner." She said that last part without any expression on her face. She'd had 14 months to absorb it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, though I already understood, even as the words left my mouth. "I didn't know if you knew," she said. "And then when I decided you didn't, I didn't know what he would do if you found out, and he found out you found out." She looked at her hands. "I didn't want something to happen to you before I was ready. Before she was ready." My 9-year-old stepdaughter had been quietly preparing. She had kept the phone her mother's sister, her aunt in Portland, had mailed her for her birthday. Derek didn't know about it. She'd kept it charged using a portable battery pack she'd ordered herself with a $20 bill she'd found in a jacket pocket, spending 3 weeks of lunchtime research finding a battery pack cheap enough that the package would be small enough to hide. She had her aunt's number memorized. She had the non-emergency police line for our county saved in the phone. She'd written down in a small notebook tucked under her mattress dates and things she'd overheard, building a record the way she'd seen people do on a true crime podcast she wasn't technically allowed to watch. A 9-year-old? Building a case file. "I needed to know more before I told anyone," she said. "I needed it to be enough." I was crying by this point, though I hadn't noticed when I started. "The gas," I said. "That was him," she nodded. "He came back this morning, before you were awake. I heard his car. He came in through the side door." She'd watched through her barely open bedroom door as he went to the utility room. She'd seen enough to know. She'd waited until she heard his car leave again, then waited another 10 minutes to be sure. I thought about that. My husband pulling out of the driveway while I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee, already gone, the fuse already lit, kissing me on the forehead on his way out the door to let me die. My phone was on the kitchen counter. I picked it up. "I'm calling 911, I said. Lily nodded. "I know, I have the notebook and the phone. I saved his voicemails." She paused. "One of them is from 3 weeks ago. He didn't know I could hear it playing. He was talking to someone about the timeline. I called 911. I told them there had been a gas leak, deliberately opened, I believed, and I told them my husband's name and that I had reason to believe it was intentional. The dispatcher told me to leave the house immediately. We went out the front door and sat on the front porch step together, Lily's wheelchair beside her, both of us in our pajamas in the October cold, and I put my arm around her and she leaned against me and neither of us said anything for a long time. The fire department arrived first, then a police unit, then a second one. I answered their questions clearly. Lily, when they got to her, answered hers more clearly than I did. She produced the notebook. She produced the notebook. She produced the phone with the voicemails. One of the officers, a woman about my age who kept her voice very level and her eyes very kind, asked Lily how long she'd been keeping track of things. Lily thought about it and said, "Since November of last year." The officer wrote something down. She didn't say anything, but I saw something move across her face. The detective they sent that afternoon took the phone and the notebook into evidence. He told me, without elaborating much, that what was on the phone was significant. He asked me about Derek's finances. I told him everything I knew, which I realized as I talked was both more and less than I thought. I knew about the business. I didn't know about the second life insurance policy Derek had taken out on me 11 months ago, one I'd signed without fully reading during a stack of refinancing documents he put in front of me one evening, pen already uncapped. $250,000. The detective told me that like he was reading me a weather forecast. $250,000. The mortgage on the house was $140,000. Derek's business had been struggling for the better part of a year, Belina quietly in ways he'd hidden from me. He was arrested at O'Hare Airport 2 days later, waiting for his return flight. He'd apparently continued with the Chicago conference entirely normally, attending panels, eating at restaurants, answering work emails. Either he was confident it had worked, or confident that even if something had gone wrong, he'd be unreachable long enough to construct a story. The detectives told me later that his phone showed he'd called the house number twice, which prosecutors would eventually argue was to confirm. The woman's voicemails turned out to be a former colleague. They'd been in contact for nearly 2 years. She was charged separately. The weeks that followed were not the kind of thing that fits neatly into the timeline of a story. They were long and strange and exhausting in a way that had nothing dramatic about it. Paperwork, victim advocates, a temporary restraining order, phone calls with attorneys, the particular fluorescent light misery of official waiting rooms. My mother flew in from Tucson and slept on the couch and made too much soup and did not once say, "I told you so," which is the best thing she's ever done for me. Lily went to stay with her aunt from Portland, who came within 48 hours of my phone call. A woman with short gray-streaked hair and a fierce, quiet competence that made me understand immediately where Lily had gotten certain qualities. We stood in the driveway when she arrived, and she looked at me for a long moment and said, "Thank you for taking care of her." I told her Lily had been the one taking care of me. Her aunt absorbed that without surprise. She just nodded, like she already knew. Lily's medical situation became part of the investigation. Specifically, whether Derek had known about her recovery and concealed it, or whether he'd been genuinely unaware. The medical records showed her last official assessment had noted possible future improvement. Derek had been present at that appointment. His attorney later argued he hadn't understood the implications. The prosecutor argued differently. There was a moment, about 6 weeks in, when I went back to the house to collect some things. I stood in the utility room and looked at the gas shutoff valve. It's such an ordinary piece of equipment. Dull gray metal, the kind of thing you'd walk past 1,000 times. I thought about Lily walking down that hallway in her yellowed-up pajamas, moving with that careful deliberateness, knowing exactly where to go. I don't think I fully understood until that moment what she had done. Not just that morning, but for 14 months before it. A child who had already had the floor pulled out from under her once, who had every reason to trust no one, who had chosen, quietly, methodically, with a kind of patience I still can't entirely comprehend, to protect someone she decided was worth protecting. I sold the house 8 months later. I moved to a smaller place in a different part of the city, an apartment with a second bedroom and a bathroom with a wide doorway because Lily's aunt had asked if I wanted to continue being part of Lily's life, and I'd said yes before she finished the sentence. Lily comes to stay with me on school breaks. She walks now without hiding it, a slight hitch in her left stride that she says she barely notices anymore. She's in 5th grade. She likes true crime podcasts and marine biology, and makes her bed every morning with the precision that still occasionally stops me cold. Derek pleaded guilty 18 months after his arrest to attempted murder, insurance fraud, and 2 other charges I couldn't summarize without a legal dictionary. He's in a state correctional facility in Chillicothe. I know because the victim's advocate sends me updates when there are hearings I can attend. And I've attended 2. I don't feel what I expected to feel in those rooms. Mostly I feel a flat, steady clarity like a pane of very clean glass. The last time Lily visited, she brought a new notebook, spiral-bound orange cover. She put it on my kitchen table, and when I asked what it was for, she looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Just in case," she said. I laughed. Then I bought her the good waffles. I keep thinking about that orange notebook Lily put on my kitchen table. Not the evidence notebook, the new one. The one she bought herself, just in case. She didn't explain it any further than that, and she didn't need to. I understood exactly what she meant, because I'd spent the better part of 2 years living in a house where I'd stopped paying attention, stopped asking questions, stopped noticing the small things that didn't quite add up. Lily never stopped. That's the difference between us, and I've thought about it more than I can say. There's something people don't talk about when they tell stories like mine. They focus on the villain, the betrayal, the scheme, the arrest at the airport, and yes, all of that is real and all of it matters. But what stays with me isn't Derek. What stays with me is a 9-year-old girl lying still in her bed in the dark, listening, deciding what kind of person she was going to be about what she'd heard. She had every reason to shut down. She'd already lost her mother. She was living in a body that had failed her once. She could have gone inward, gone silent in the way that's actually silent. Not strategic, just broken. Instead, she made a plan. She kept a record. She protected someone she decided was worth protecting, even when she had no way of knowing if that decision would ever pay off. That's not something you're born with. That's something that gets built, slowly, out of whatever a person chooses to do with what happens to them. I think about the choices I made in those same years, and I'm not proud of all of them. I moved fast because I was lonely. I signed documents I didn't read because I wanted to trust someone. I let a man define what our household was, what my role in it was, who I was allowed to be in it. And I called that love because I didn't have a better word for it at the time. Derek didn't just try to take my life with a gas valve. He'd been slowly taking it in smaller ways for 2 years, and I let him because I mistook compliance for kindness and control for stability. What Lily understood, at 9 with everything working against her, was that doing the right thing and doing the smart thing are not always separate. She didn't just feel that something was wrong. She thought carefully about what wrong looked like, documented it, prepared for it, and waited until she had enough to act. That combination, the moral clarity to know what she owed me and the patience and precision to act on it effectively, is something I'm still learning to put together in myself. The consequences caught up with Derek not because the universe arranged it, but because a child refused to let them not. She didn't wait to be rescued. She didn't assume someone else would figure it out. She took the information she had and built something with it, piece by piece, in secret, over 14 months, without anyone telling her she could. I sold that house. I built something smaller, quieter, more mine. I read what I signed now. I asked questions I used to be afraid would make me seem difficult. I've started paying attention to the small things that don't add up. Not with paranoia, but with the kind of honest, steady attention I should have been paying all along. Lily brings an orange notebook to my kitchen table. I make the real waffles. We don't talk about Derek. We talk about marine biology and what she's reading and whether a particular species of octopus is actually as intelligent as the researchers claim it is. She thinks it probably is. She usually turns out to be right.